All right. We should be live. Let me check on YouTube real quick. How's everybody doing today, tonight, this evening? Let me see. Please go follow me on social media. It's listed right there below the flames rising from hell. Wait. All right, so I see an ads playing, so I guess I am live. Let me see. All right, cool. All right, cool. So let's talk Dorne, and the chat showing up too. Awesome. Um, I'm not really like all that familiar with, talking about Dorne on my streams, right? So I kind of get to talk about everything. Like this video is just Dorne wins a winner. And if someone's watching this now or afterwards and they're like, man, this dude barely talks about what's going to happen in wins a winner, it's because I try to pinpoint a couple things that I wanted to talk about with Dorne. But, that would end up being a 2.5 hour stream. And I really only have like an hour for this stream. So let's start with the sand snakes, which you can see I got the. Let me make that bigger. The Westeros.org. And this is cool because if I click on any of the pictures of the sand snakes, it has the art listed right there. So there's a bunch of sand snakes. Let's see, there's Obara, Nymeria, Tyene, Sorella, Elia, Obella, Doria, and Larisa, right? But not all of them really have an effect on the plot line because Dorisa, Larisa, Elia, they're like 12, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, is it Larisa? I don't know. One of them joins Ariane on her journey to go meet with John Connington, but I haven't read those sample chapters for Winds of Winter all that well, and I'm not familiar with them. I could probably pull them up and read them for this stream, but again, only have an hour, right? So let's talk about the actual sand snakes. Now, if you're unaware, Oberyn has a bunch of bastard daughters, and in Dorne, that's kind of like okay. Like bastards are considered dirty and filthy creatures in the Seven Kingdoms, except for Dorne. Dorne also, certain things that are considered tableau, like, openly parading your paramours around, which your paramours are basically like your girlfriend, like, or your boyfriend, right? So if you're married for political reasons, but you can also have a concubine, someone that you basically have sex for fun with, and that's okay down there. In Westeros, they do that, but it's not open, right? So this is why Dorne is sort of, scorned, I guess you could call it that. Like, people from Dorne, rather, when they visit, the other Seven Kingdoms, unless you're a prince of Dorne, and even if you are a prince of Dorne, you're openly sort of mocked and like ridiculed and made fun of because of the Dornish customs, right? You could call it queer customs because the Targaryens also have queer customs. It's another reason why they're, sort of hard for the common people and everybody else in Westeros to accept. Also, Westeros is so big that there's enough space in between borders that people change, like customs and all that stuff, like especially in the north and the south, right? So Oberyn has a bunch of daughters, and up until A Feast for Crows, Oberyn's not a POV character, right? So up until A Feast for Crows, we don't really have that strong of a viewpoint, right? And then we get two viewpoints. Aegon Martell, who is Doran's daughter, so Oberyn's niece, and then also Ariahota, who's this badass, probably one of the best fighters, at least mentally, because you get his POV, and he always is like sizing people up constantly. He's like, man, I'll fuck you up, man. I keep my axe sharp as fuck, man. I can shave with my axe. I'll fuck you up. How good are you with those, right? Like, he's constantly judging people, and because of that, I'm like, oh yeah, this dude's a badass fighter. And I think a lot of people would read him are like, yeah, Ariahota's a badass fighter. But anyway, he's a guard, and his POV is very similar to Davos, right? So Davos is the POV in the Stannis' camp. So, Ariahota and Arianne are the POVs that we get. And I saw a post on Reddit / A Song of Ice and Fire either earlier today or like last night or something, where somebody made a really good point, right? And I think a lot of people think this too. It's just not one that you hear repeated a lot. Is that the Dornish plot is like too much, and like George shouldn't have added those POVs in a feast in with dance, right? But the person mentioned in that post, and I can't remember their username, right? But they mentioned that there's only like 5 there's not very many Dornish chapters, and it's actually very easy to wrap it up. And if George actually puts that Arianne chapter the way it's written right now, we sort of have a lot of the newer factions converging a lot closer than people like Jon, Arya, and Breanne will get back together. Some of the newer characters and POVs and stuff are like closer storyline-wise. Like Tyrion's on his way to Daenerys. Daenerys is going to use that fleet to eventually get back to Westeros. At least attempt. She may die in the attempt. I don't know. Hopefully Winds of Winter is going to come out, right? But you have these Dornish characters. And I hope we get a POV of one of them. I know I say that, but maybe it would be easier if George wrote like other authors, like if you wrote like Frank Herbert, you get like 4 POVs on one page, which can seem daunting, but it's also nice to know right then and there, this is this person's intentions, right? So anyway, I think the most interesting sand snake, in my opinion, is Alaris. Alaris, or Sorella, is currently at the Citadel, right? And she's studying with Sam. And Sam is like, it's a lot of people's favorite character, but I really like Sam's POV because it's well written, and also he's like Bran in the sense that he's got this thirst for knowledge, so he's always trying to find stuff out. Like Bran's thirst for knowledge led him north of the Wall, right? And he's like visiting with Bloodraven, and Bloodraven's dope as shit. And Sam's quest for knowledge, at least studying White Walkers, made Jon Snow be like, well, we're going to need another maester anyway. Also, there's a few other things that made Jon sim Sam to Old Town, but ultimately, because Sam is so inquisitive, it's exciting to have him at the source of knowledge. He just basically went to go work for like Google, right? But like a really high up position at Google. I don't know. I'm trying to make either a euphemism or something on the spot, but I can't really make it. But yeah, anyway, Sam is at this source of knowledge, and it's cool to have a POV like him there, right? So he's there, and he meets this character called Alaris. And Alaris is one of Oberyn's bastard daughters, the Sand Snake, and she's actively at the Citadel because, well, she wants to forge links in her chain. She's already done that, but she's also under the guise of a boy. She's pretending to be a boy, right? What's interesting is that she's known as the Sphinx, and right before Sam gets to Old Town, he's told by a delirious, possibly Alzheimer's, I don't know if that's the right way to use that, but yeah, Maester Aemon has Alzheimer's, because he thinks that Sam is his brother, Egg. He goes, Egg, I dreamt that we were old, or something like that. So I feel like maybe that's part of the delirium. But anyway, he gets a fever because he sort of spends one night out in the rain when they're on the ship to Old Town, and with Gilly and her baby, who's actually Mance Rayder's baby. Mance Rayder is still alive in Winterfell, right? So he just sort of sits out there and catches a fever. And when they're in Bravos, they try to heal him, but they can't, and he dies. And they end up putting him in this cask of rum to preserve his body, right? That shit is crazy. You're like, what? He did what? Yeah, they do that to preserve their body. But ultimately, Sam is told by Maester Aemon in his delirium, right, that the Sphinx is the riddle, or the Sphinx isn't the riddle is the Sphinx, or something like that. So, the way I just said that, and if it didn't make sense, that's how Sam perceives the information, because remember, Maester Aemon is out of his mind, so he's just saying some stuff that is crazy. But you gotta realize, Targaryens have dragon dreams, so what's most likely happening is Maester Aemon is receiving these dragon dreams at the end of his life. So they're, oh, you know what I haven't done? Check the chat to see if the audio is good and stuff. Is the audio good? All right, cool. Okay, I feel like everybody would have been saying something if it wasn't. Cool. So yeah, he's told this information by Sam, and then as soon as Sam, this is after Maester Aemon dies, and his body is in the room, right? He meets this character, Alaris, the Sand Snake in disguise as a boy, right? And she's known as the Sphinx. Everybody thinks he's a he. So Sam immediately tries to figure out that mystery, but that's one of the Sand Snakes. We do get a POV from Pate the Pig Boy at the beginning of A Feast for Crows, and he runs. That's the first time we meet Alaris through this Pate the Pig Boy character's POV, and Pate the Pig Boy dies, but a faceless man kills him. So the faceless man steals his face and is also at Old Town right now. Because Sam runs into Pate the Pig Boy. Sam immediately thinks something's off with the dude, right? But he's everybody thinks he's still alive, but he's not, the faceless man. The reason why he's killed is because he steals this key that can open any door in the Citadel, and he steals the key to get a gold dragon from this alchemist dude. He thinks he's an alchemist, but he doesn't realize he's a faceless man. And as soon as he touches it, the coin is poisoned, and he sort of just falls to the ground and dies. And then you see him again through Sam's POV when Sam gets to the Citadel. But Sorella is one of Oberyn's bastard daughters, right? And then we also have, Obara, Nymeria, and Tyene, right? Obara is kind of aggressive, right? So like the versions we saw on the TV show aren't necessarily 100% accurate, but we don't have a bunch of information on them because, well, especially when you compare them to other characters. So I think, it's hard for D&D to sort of fully flesh them out, but also season 5 with Dorne, that is crazy. They sent Jaime to basically go do what Ares Elkhart does, kind of, I guess, right? And so we ended up having like Jaime and Bronn dressed like Knights of Arabia, kind of, But I guess you could say the costumes were like Spanish Moorish costumes, I guess, right? Kind of. They kind of look like that. I can't think of them, but the image I do have in my head is like they had like a sand mask, which I think the Dornish characters do that in the high desert of Dorne because it's really hot. Ariahota comes from a place, Norvos, which if I'm not mistaken, Norvos has got a similar climate to Braavos, so it's kind of maybe not as cold and rainy as Braavos, but he thinks the sky is like a pale sun that's kind of like mild, right? So like mild environment. And then when he gets to Dorne, he's not used to all of the crazy heat because it's like a desert climate, and also their food is really spicy, right? But ultimately, I think what George tries to do with the Dornish plot is obviously try to fill out more of his world, right? Because Dorne is mentioned from book 1, and until Oberyn shows up in a Storm of Swords, we don't really have an actual Dornish character. We don't get a POV from him, but Tyrion parlays with him, and that's the best character to do that with, writing wise, because Tyrion is the fucking man, and his mind really paints a vivid picture of Oberyn, which is why he's a favorite character in the books, and then also on the TV show. When they're reading Tyrion's POV and they're like, we got to paint this dude, we got to flesh him out for the TV show, it's really easy for them, right? Obviously they got Pedro Pascal, who's a really likable dude, to play him anyway, but I kind of feel like anybody who would have played Oberyn would have been somewhat likable and somewhat memorable because of the role, right? And it's because of how George wrote it, but also obviously credit to them. Have y'all seen, I saw the headline that House of the Dragon has got less views than The Last of Us. That's interesting. I didn't actually read any articles for it, but I saw that was trending a little bit on Twitter, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so Dorne. I think, Doran Martell is ultimately an interesting character as well, because he reveals in the Watcher chapter in the Dance of Dragons that he's, sort of symbology that he uses is that, or like the words he uses is like, I was the grass and Oberyn was the snake. So like a snake is a snake, sort of. Without grass, you see a snake and you know to avoid it. But if there's grass there, you don't necessarily see the snake. So he used that as a metaphor to say, like, look, because all the sand snakes are questioning him. They're like, dude, you've been inactive as hell. You haven't really done anything to avenge our father's death. What's going on? So he sort of has to prove to the sand snakes that he's been actively campaigning with Oberyn the whole time. He just has to sort of take the backseat burner and let Oberyn do all of the active things, because he's, well, for one, he's the actual prince of Dorne, meaning he's like the ruler of Dorne, and Oberyn is his younger brother, right? So he sort of has to look out that way. And also, Oberyn's done a bunch of things, and he sort of covers for him. A lot of the times, he ends up covering either, whether it be some of the mistakes that Oberyn makes or some of the things that he does that would be considered outright, treasonous against the Lannisters. And that's actually one of the things he mentions in the Watcher chapters. He's like, all right, Sand Snakes, I know that y'all want to think that I'm an inactive, lazy dude, but also let me remind you I got gout, right? So it's actually really interesting because Ablar is the one pushing him when they have, let me explain. The Mountain raped and murdered Elia Martell and her children, right? And that is Oberyn's sister, right? Doran's sister, right? So that's why the Dornish people currently hate the Lannisters, right? So finally, after Oberyn dies in Tyrion's trial by combat, Oberyn ends up cutting the Mountain like he does in the TV show, and the poison that he uses on his spear is super like mutated to the point where no matter how much or how tiny the cut is that the person gets inflicted upon them, they're still going to die because that poison is like insanely mutated. And also the Mountain's a big ass dude, right? So it's important to have, stuff like that. So no matter what, Oberyn achieved his goal, even if it was through death, right? So he dies, obviously. So the Sand Snakes are still pissed off, obviously. Cersei, realizes that Doran is potentially pissed off as well. So she's like, let me send them the skull of the Mountain, right? To appease them, to show you that, hey, look, Oberyn did kill this dude. Let's not have war, right? And Doran agrees with that. He's like, it's not time for us right now to openly rebel against the crown, because basically Dorne is a very conflicted place right now, because the way the Sand Snakes feel about Oberyn is the way most of Dorne feels about Oberyn, right? So it's not easy for him to necessarily rile all of his forces in Dorne under one banner, right? So you always hear Dorne has 10,000 spears at the ready. Not necessarily the case. You know what I mean? He wouldn't be able to, the Prince of Dorne, as of right now, wouldn't necessarily be able to rally all of his forces under the same cause, because they don't really agree with his reaction to Oberyn dying. And Oberyn was favorite, right? So it's a similar thing with the Targaryens. You have one Targaryen brother who everybody feels like should be the king or would be a good king or has a good personality to be king, but then the other brother is the king, right? So the very first pair of Targaryen brothers we hear about in the story, Aenys and Maegor. Initially, Maegor winning tourneys at the age of 12, beating up people who were twice, 3 times his age, cutting cats with swords, right? Maegor, initially, people were like, man, this dude has Blackfire. He claimed Balerion. Eventually, he doesn't do that till later, right? But a lot of people think that Maegor may be a way better choice for king than Aenys. But Aenys was born first, so he wears the crown. So Maegor would never be the king because Aenys starts having children. That pushes Maegor further and further back. It's kind of how it was with Oberyn and Doran in Dorne, because, Oberyn's this badass dude with the spear, and he's milking vipers, literally milking snakes. And check this out. He went to the Citadel and forged several links in his chain before he's like, yo, I'm fucking done with this. I'm bored. I'm out. Right? That's actually where he had Obara, if I'm not mistaken, because Obara's mom was a whore in Old Town. But yeah, so that's really cool. The similarity, George uses that throughout his world to make it cohesive and fit. Right? It's awesome. So Doran ends up telling the Sand Snakes that, look, I was the grass that hid your father's actions. Ultimately, it's going to be time for us to act very soon, right? So this is at the point where he sends out these Sand Snakes to go on different missions. Obara, I believe, goes to escort... So Ceres Oakheart is initially a king's guard that is sent down to Dorne to protect Myrcella, because Myrcella is sent to Dorne, like in the TV show with Tyrion. Tyrion's like, yo, we gotta make Dorne happy. Let's send them a hostage, basically. So that hostage is his niece Myrcella. He does it. It's a good idea. It's not a weird thing to do because the rest of the Seven Kingdoms do it, but ultimately he does kind of do it to get at Cersei. But he also knows that the Dornish people don't harm children. That's not something they would do. So he sort of does this to, like I said, get at Cersei, but also to keep Myrcella safe because she shouldn't be involved in the politics in King's Landing anyway. And honestly, if Cersei had didn't have a chip on her shoulders and was thinking clearly, because Cersei's actually really intelligent, she would think to do the same thing too. Just because she knows, like, yo, we barely have a grasp on the throne right now. Joffrey died. Let's send... You know what I mean? If she was paying attention to the writing on the wall, she would have thought to do that too. But anyway, Myrcella is attacked by this dude named Darkstar, who is I think there's probably other members of House Dane alive, but ultimately he's the active one, right? He's not Sword of the Morning, though. Sword of the Morning is this title that's given to a member of House Dane, and they rock Dawn, which is this, not a Valyrian steel sword, it's actually a meteorite steel sword, which is really dope. May potentially be the actual original Lightbringer, who knows? It fell to Earth, and the original members of House Dane followed the comet to the end, and that's where they formed Starfall. That's like their keep, right? So this fucking emo dude, I call him emo because... everybody does, but also he's got like a really emo haircut. I think it's like all black, but then he's got like silver streaks, or maybe it's silver streaks, but then he's got all black. Yeah, because the House Dane has like Valyrian features, right? So they're basically just a lost Valyrian family. They were probably the original. They're probably descended from the original dragon riders who taught the Valyrians how to do it. So they have some older artifacts like a meteorite sword, and then maybe dragon steel was formed after. Everybody saw how cool the meteorite story, the idea was. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting too sidetracked. So this dude Darkstar is traveling with Arianne because Arianne plans on crowning Myrcella to like piss off Cersei in King's Landing, but also she's mad at her dad for trying to take her place. Because remember, in Dorne, like I mentioned this before, everybody knows this, but in Dorne, you can be a woman. And if you're older than your brother, you get the crown, right? So this POV, Arianne finds out that her father sent her younger brother, Quentin, to go and marry Daenerys, to go and attempt to try to marry Daenerys and bring her into Westeros that way, bring her into the fold. So she automatically assumes, oh, fuck, he's trying to usurp my throne and give it to my younger brother. So she gets mad, so she hatches this plot to take Myrcella to go and crown her and Trystane, because technically in Dorne, Myrcella should be the queen, because under Dornish law, Myrcella's older than Tommen, right? So the plan goes awry, right? She never finds out, but one of her friends tells on her. I don't really have any thoughts on who it is. The whole point in the way George is keeping it a mystery is that Doran is a lot more powerful than his children realize, like Arianne realizes, or other characters realize, like his nieces, the Sand Snakes, right? He's got plans in motion that they don't know about. It's similar with Roose. Roose is told through Theon's POV. Theon's extremely intelligent. Even though he has a broken psyche, he figures out stuff way faster than everybody else in Winterfell, right? Like when all the people start dying in Roose's camp, Theon's like, oh, no, this is what's actually happened. He just thinks he doesn't say it because he knows he'll get flayed or whatever. But anyway, Theon talks to this lady, Barbary Dustin, and she tells Theon, like, we're all Roos's playthings. Like, you may think Ramsay's terrible and a bad person, but Roose is even worse, right? And then, when you find out some of the things that Roose does, like the way that Ramsay came into the world, right, is he's a terrible dude. So you find out, same in the Dance of Dragons, that Roose has all of these different plans in motion. It's same with Doran, right? So never underassume quiet characters. They're usually the ones that come out on top, because House Bolton, is currently kind of ruling Winterfell right now, right? Which means they're ultimately sort of, they have a fake Arya, but legally, they beat the Starks. And House Bolton and House Stark have had enmities that go back since the beginning of the First Men. Like, they probably had a massive feud, similar with the Lannisters and the Starks now after the War in the Five Kings. The House Bolton and House Stark have had wars, mostly because of how House Bolton does things, right? So House Bolton would flay people, flay their enemies, wear their skins as cloaks, right? They did terrible things. So did the other Northmen, but House Stark were the rulers of the North, so they had problems with House Bolton doing that. Probably was a power issue, because House Bolton and House Stark have married back and forth before, but ultimately, when I'm rereading Dance now for the 7th time, I'm like, oh yeah, this is probably, especially when Barbary Dustin says like, yo, Roose is got, we're all Roose's playthings. It makes me think, yeah, potentially, he has hatched a master plan and used Tywin and Walder Frey as playthings in the Red Wedding, and potentially was like, yeah, I'm going to bring out, this is the downfall of House Stark. He's like, I'm going to release my bastard. He kind of is so good at planning stuff when things happen naturally. Maybe, it's easy to get wrapped up and think that one character's behind a lot of stuff. and it's possible because this is a fake story, right? But anyway, let me get back on track here. Doran sort of shows that he has active people spying on his daughters. Oh yeah, that's what made me think of Roose. Let me go back for a second. Roose tells Theon all of Ramsay's boys, the bastard's boys. So like, my favorite is Damon Dance for Me, because that's a funny fucking name. He carries a greased whip, and he's always whipping things. He's like, and he goes by the full name. So you're reading, it's like, Damon Dance for Me, says Theon, hold up. It's hilarious. Damon Dance for Me. And then also, we have Prince Damon on House of the Dragon, right? It's my boy Jay Fox. Painted that. Shout out my boy Jay Fox on Instagram. Go follow him. Let me make sure I'm still live here. But yeah, shout out my boy Jay Fox. Go follow. Oh wait, y'all can't even see it. Wait, no, you can't see it. Yeah, it's right here. What's up, my boy? What's up? Y'all see my boy? All right, so let me keep my mic like this then. It's too close to my face. Feels like I got a dick in my face or something. All right. Let me get back on track here. So, all of the people that fuck with Theon, that are part of the Bastard's Boys, right? They're all actually working for Roose. Roose is actively having them spy and report on what, Ramsay's doing. Ultimately, Ramsay's this really terrible dude because he killed Roose's actual son. This whole story to that is really sad, but basically, Roose's actual son goes and seeks out Ramsay because he's in an area where he sees brothers interacting, and Roose's actual son thinks like, oh, I have a bastard brother, Ramsay. Let me go seek him out. And he does that, and then he, of course, Ramsay fucking poisons him. And then, yeah. So anyway, Doran is actively, probably some of, Arianne's friends are spying. It doesn't matter which one. Like I said, the whole point is that he's doing it. Doran is in the know. He knows what's going on, right? Now, I think what happens in the sample chapter with Arianne, she goes to meet with John Connington. Like, she's going to go and find out if potentially, I guess Aegon would be her nephew. No, her cousin. Aegon would be her cousin, right? Yeah, because their parents are brothers and sisters. So yeah, Aegon will be her cousin. She's going to go merge directly into that plot line. And it'll be cool because we'll have two different POVs, because John Connington is a POV and so is Arianne. I think ultimately, I like I said, I haven't really gotten into the Winds of Winter sample chapters because I don't know if those are going to be finalized. Like some of those sample chapters came out in 2013 or like 2011 or something, like, or they didn't even actually get released in like written form. They were sort of reiterated after someone went to some sort of convention that George was at and he read them, right? So it's like I probably will read them. I have read them before. I'm just saying, like, multiple times to be able to pull from them. I don't think the Ariane chapter is very long. I think it's only like 10 pages or something. But that's probably what's going to happen with her plot line, is she's going to obviously potentially try to marry Aegon, and that'll be interesting because the whole goal that Aegon's trying to do with John Connington, young Griff, right, that whole plot line is he's trying to get the Westeros to establish a foothold so they can marry Daenerys, right? So, thinking about that now, I don't think Ariane's going to try to necessarily marry him, although she'll consider it because they're cousins. She'll probably be the one person, this will be really exciting when she does see him, is because she'll know what her family looks like, and this dude is half Martell, right? Aegon is. And if you're unaware, holy shit, I just knocked over my little vape pen right here. If you're unaware, Aegon is the bastard son. Well, no, I'm sorry. Nope. Aegon is not a bastard. Aegon is legitimate. Now that we know what we know about King's Landing, how easy it is to sneak someone out of the Red Keep, you could sneak a dang baby out. And Griff tells, Tyrion that his, the person that died in his stead was just sort of like an orphan whose parents sold him for some liquor. It was some booze they had never had. Like the little added details of that. And then George shows you how Targaryens sneak out. And like, even though George initially says Maegor had all of the builders killed so that no one knows how to get out of his holdfast, that's a lie, because immediately after that, somebody's sneaking in or sneaking out of his holdfast. So they probably had plans that were found, like the Citadel. But to be fair, you do hear about characters, like when Jaime is searching through the cells, you do hear about characters who were never found. Like Jaime takes a decent amount of people to go and look under the cells to see if Tyrion is down there, right? Because remember, Jaime lets Tyrion out, and he thinks that Tyrion's going to escape. Tyrion actually goes and kills their dad. So obviously, Jaime is, pretending that he didn't do that. Like, he didn't actually let Tyrion out, but also he's actively mad at Tyrion. So if he does find Tyrion, he may kill him because Tyrion killed their dad. But they just need to talk it out, because you find out Jaime doesn't really like Tywin all that much either, right? Tywin sort of, like, as good of a person as he was, he sort of failed his children the most, and that's where it counts. Like, he's actually the biggest, worst character in Song of Ice and Fire. I'm not just saying that because there's someone who comments on my videos all the time named Tywin Lannister, and they were mean to me in my social media posts telling me that, like, this seems desperate. I'm not just saying that, but because I usually say, oh yeah, Tywin's a good dude, but no, when you think about it that way, he failed his children. You kind of fucked up, because, like, you could fail your mom or your dad, whatever. If your kids look at you differently, that sucks. And actually, now that I have kids, I see why my dad doesn't stay in contact with me, because he probably is like, man, my son, my sister will tell him, right? I've told him, like, once. My sister will tell him to his face, but I've said it a few times. He's probably like, damn, my kids don't really fuck with me like that. That's what, it's probably easier for him to stay away. I'm not saying that's okay, but I'm just saying kind of a, Anyway, so with the Aegon plotline, and then Arianne meeting up with him, she'll know. She'll be able to look, because he does look like a Targaryen, right? Like, he washes his hair. He's got the silver, gold, pale hair and the purple lilac eyes, right? But he also will have, he's going to look like a Martell in the sense that he'll probably have a similar nose or jawline or something to Doran or Oberyn, right? Because Elia is their sister, and they all have the same parents. And also, I found this out from having kids. They're like, when obviously every baby that's ever been born has been born from a mother, right? They have more of their DNA, like the mom passes more of their DNA onto the child, right? So obviously, Aegon's mom being a Martell is going to he's going to favor the Martell. So when she runs into him, she's going to be able to be like, hey, you're legit. And then we'll know, because there's this massive debate. And it's interesting because the debate stems from a time when we didn't know how many people snuck out of King's Landing, or snuck out of the Red Keep, or snuck out of Maegor's Holdfast, which is the castle inside of the castle. It's a dream inside of a dream. It's an Inception castle. Like, Maegor's Holdfast is a castle inside of the Red Keep. So there's a few other things. There's like the Tower of the Hand. Cersei blows that up in the books with wildfire. And the TV show made her blow up the Sept of Baelor. So maybe she'll do that. I don't think George will have her do that, because George knows that George is very systematic with his world, and he knows that he made wildfire this insane substance. So if Cersei was stupid enough to try to blow up the Sept of Baelor in his books canon, it would blow up all of King's Landing, because there's caches of wildfire being found all the time in places like the Dragon Pit. And also Tyrion thinks like, oh man, there's probably more places like that. So if Cersei's dumb enough to do that in his books, George better plan on wiping out everybody in King's Landing. It's not just going to blow up a building that is viewable, literally viewable from the Red Keep, and everybody else is good. No, it's going to level. It's going to level the whole. It would blow up a massive chunk of King's Landing. Cersei better be outside of King's Landing. And what's interesting is he may be planning on doing that. And Cersei will be far enough away because she'll know the substance has power, right? And she thinks that she wants to build a new castle, not far from King's Landing, but outside of the city, because, King's Landing stinks. It smells like shit. Also, she actually thinks that she may even rule from Casterly Rock. And Jaime I think it's Jaime, kind of laughs at that, because she's like, why would you? We barely have a grasp on the crown. You're like, you just want to say, I want to move the ruling in the court, move the entirety of the court to Casterly Rock. But actually, she's kind of smart, because Casterly Rock is like the most defensible castle in all of Westeros, aside from the Vale. But currently the Vale is locked up in ice. Casterly Rock is not. The Vale, the Vale of Arryn, and the Vale of Arryn is a location. The castle. What the fuck is the castle called? This is embarrassing. The castle. So, Sansa just walked out of there. The Eyrie is the castle. Right? Let me look that up. I'll just look it up real quick. Let me see. Castle in the Vale. The Eyrie. A song. Yes, I was right. Okay, the Eyrie. So the Eyrie is like locked down in ice, right? So right when Sansa leaves there, they slaughter some oxen, and they just leave it there because it gets so cold that the oxen will freeze solid. But before it freezes, there's some falcons there that'll be able to feast on it, which is really badass. They're just like gonna go eat some oxen. They're not called oxen. George has like a fantastical name for them, but they're basically cow-like beast creatures. And it'll be cool because when it thaws and the inhabitants of the Eyrie come back, they'll have a feast if there's anything left. Which I think maybe George is setting that up because potentially a dragon could easily fly up there, right? Dragons have done it in the past. We're actually going to see in House of the Dragon Season 2, one of the requests that the Lady of the Vale tells to Jacaerys, she's like, you got to give me dragon riders because what you just did is scary, and I want to have riders here on my side that will be able to prevent that from happening. So, the Eyrie and Casterly Rock, and maybe Winterfell, the depths of Winterfell, so basically the crypts of Winterfell. The crypts of Winterfell would probably be a terrible place to hide out if the White Walkers take over Westeros, or you have to survive for a long winter, which I think George initially planned on having a 5-year time jump, so he was setting up these different castles potentially as being either defensible against White Walkers or defensible against holding out against an army for a long time. But dragons sort of work on every castle except for Casterly Rock. So Casterly Rock, I think, is the most defensible, but then you also have the Eyrie, right? So the Eyrie is basically a fortress built into a mountain as well, right? On the top of a mountain. Castle Rock is just set in a different environment, so they also have like their own private harbor where ships can come through. But the Eyrie is dope because they have this thing called the Moon Door, and if you have guests that you don't really fuck with like that, you could just be like, you could actually hear the music better if you step over here. And then as soon as they step over there, actually, no, it's not true. The Moon Door is this massive, like, so on the TV show, they had it built as like a hole in the ground, but like the Moon Door on the Moon Door on the books, in the books, is like this really cool carved weird wood door that makes architectural sense. It's in the wall and it's opened, but the wall leads the door, when you open it, leads nowhere except for out the side of the fucking mountain. So in right, maybe they have the door in the floor. No, I think it was on the wall, because I remember like the musician is like locks all the doors when, okay, so let me think. The musician locks all of the doors when Sansa is being questioned by her Aunt Lysa, right? So her Aunt Lysa has the musician open up the Moon Door, and I think when he opens it up, he pulls a latch backwards. And if you pull a latch backwards, the door would be upright, because if the door's on the ground, you would pull it sideways like he would have described. So that's why I think the door's on the side of the wall. But anyway, the Eyrie is cool because it has things like that. You could be like, bye. Like, I think, I can't remember, but I think Lysa's body is like so badly damaged. It's like, I don't think it's recovered, right? Or maybe it takes them a while to recover it. I can't remember. So anyway, getting back on track, the Dornish master plan, one of the big things that's going to be happening, or two of the big things that I kind of established, are the fact that Sam is at the Citadel with Alleras. Alleras Sorella, one of Oberyn's bastard daughters, she's got a really interesting plotline because she's already forged several links to her chain. She's pretending to be a boy. She's known as the Sphinx, and she's hanging out with Sam. And then you also have Arianne, who's not a sand snake, but she is on her way to confirm Aegon is who he is, right? And then also we have Obara, who, like I mentioned, is escorting Aerys Oakheart's replacement, this dude named Balon Swan. And it's interesting because Arianne tries to sleep with him, but he's like, nah, I'm not having it. Or at least Arya Hota thinks, no, he's not having it. He's a man. Whereas Aerys Oakheart was still old enough to be a man. He was still a boy because he was a virgin, right? Like, he didn't even get all the way inside of Arianne. He jacked off on her leg. He did. He ejaculated on her leg because he got really excited. It was his first time. Also, she is a Dornish swamp, So, anyway, Balon Swan is being escorted by Obara. Obara is another one of the Sand Snakes. They're going to go and find out. Basically, they're blaming Darkstar for what happened to Myrcella. So, obviously, Myrcella is convinced by Arianne. Not obviously, because this is sort of unexpected, but Arianne convinces Myrcella to lie to Balon Swan to say that it was all Darkstar's fault. And to be fair, Myrcella's a little girl. She had her ear cut off and a big scar on her face. Maybe she thinks it's a good idea because she's traumatized from that. So she's like, no, maybe that did actually happen. I don't know. We don't get the details of it. So anyway, that's what one of the other Sand Snakes is doing. They're going to High Hermitage, and they're going to go meet up with the Darkstar dude, who Obara's pretty badass. She could hold her own, right? And then she's also got Balon Swan. So if they do go to High Hermitage, where this dude Darkstar is at, it's going to be an interesting fight. And I don't know which one, like which POV would let us know what happens, because none of those characters are POV characters. Balon Swan, Obara, Darkstar, not a POV yet. Darkstar could potentially run into another POV if he's not actually at High Hermitage. And, they kind of are going off on this journey to ultimately, it would be cool if they could claim, Dawn and bring it into the storyline and maybe give it to someone who's going to be involved. Maybe they could give it to, Aegon, because Aegon, we don't know if he has Blackfire, right? Because Blackfire sort of disappeared. It's taken over to Essos and just sort of disappears. The TV show could confirm what happens to it, but I think George would probably write Fire and Blood Part 2, and then we know what happened to So that's pretty much the big parts of the Dornish plan. Like I said, there's other sand snakes, but they're not necessarily as interesting to me. And also, whatever they're doing doesn't really affect the story too much. Like I said, let's see, Elio, Bella, Doria, and Larisa, they're all really young. But I think Obella, one of the other younger sand snakes, goes with Arianne, like I said, to go and, confirm Aegon. But that's not really that exciting. The exciting parts are kind of what I just explained, which is another reason why I was saying this live stream wouldn't necessarily take so long. But this is the most fun part, in my opinion. I'm about to pull up some questions that were submitted to me over on Patreon. And if you're unaware, oh crap, did I actually alert it? Dang, I didn't. So I had done a new thing where I included my Patreon thing, but it's patreon.com/reviews if you want to join for like $2. I actually did a condensed version of this live stream yesterday. Oh yeah, by the way, this is my t-shirt. You can find these at my Teespring store. This is, I've explained it a bunch, but this is a really cool design that I made myself. But yeah, over on Patreon, I did a condensed version where I kind of just explained everything I just did, but in like 13 minutes instead of 45 minutes. But I think people enjoy it, maybe a longer version. So I always ask my patrons, do y'all have any questions that you want me to either talk about or mention during the live stream? So there were 7 that were submitted. Thank you for all of y'all's support. Also, thank you to everybody who's watching right now. The first one is from The North Must Remember, and he is on a tier over on my Patreon known as the Dragon Knight tier. And basically, that's a tier where if you join that, you get to submit any topic you want me to cover, like once or twice a month. And I think most of them, like my other members, Breanne Johnson, and also Tyler Schnabel recently joined. They haven't submitted to me any topics. They have before, right? But, that's one of the rewards that you get if you join that tier, right? But thank you for joining. Most remember, you might be watching right now. I'm going to check the chat here in a second. Shout out. Please go watch his channel. He makes YouTube videos as well. He says, thank you for your support, man. He says, if you could get any Game of Thrones actor or actress to record a short promotion for your channel, who would it be and what would they say? That's interesting. So from Game of Thrones or Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon? Because I got some I got the Knights Guard, the King's Guard members, the twins, they follow me on Instagram, so that's kind of cool. If they would, I don't know if they would do that, but yeah, I would pick them from House of the Dragon or Aegon, or obviously Matt Smith, right? Rhaenyra, Emma Darcy, right? Any one of them. This is a hard question. I kind of always glance these, obviously, because I heart them, but I never really give them thought, and I do that live to kind of react to them. We'll say from Game of Thrones, I'll pick one. Probably Emilia Clarke, easily. Also, Emilia Clarke has done that before, with Ome's charity thing. She always does she did it for season 8, where she pretended to give a tour to the set of season 8. And it was an Ome's thing where you could donate for a chance to go and have dinner with the Game of Thrones people. Emilia Clarke, I'd pick Emilia Clarke. And what would I have her say? She wouldn't say this, and I wouldn't even ask her to, but I, just as a joke for the live stream, I would say, I would have her do the Zaldrizos Mustari Ixostar, right? But then also the long night, right? And then I would have her just say long night, and and then I would edit it and put myself to pop up right before she says that and be like, we had sex, and then make myself disappear, and then she would say long night or all night. So, I don't know, really corny, but I just thought of it just now. So yeah, Emilia Clarke for sure. But also any one of the actors from Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Thank you for submitting that, Northwest Remember. Then the next one's from Billy Bob Robertson, my Scottish sheep fucking brother. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, dude. Thank you for your support, man. He says, thoughts on sheep fuckers of Dorne? Haha, joke. What are your thoughts on Doran's master plan? If you can't, I'm sure you saw, I think you did see that, the condensed version. I'm a big fan of Doran's master plan. Main reason being is because he's one of the best players in the game because no one knows he's actively playing it so aggressively, right? So if his daughter doesn't even know his plan's intentions, that's amazing because he's like probably 10 or 15 steps ahead of most people, right? He's like Tyrion level, but Tyrion has, it works out for Tyrion that he's a Lannister because it's one of the only reasons why he's still alive. He makes a contract with the Golden Company with Brown Ben Plum to give Brown Ben Plum all of the wealth in Casterly Rock. It's one of the reasons why he's only still alive and potentially how he's going to get back to Westeros or to Daenerys, right? But also it hurts him because everybody knows who he is, right? So like a lot of people will know who the fuck he is and he tries to pretend to be Hugh Hill, but everybody's like, no, I know the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, the way you can't really say the way you look because he's a dwarf, but, actually, no, you can. He doesn't look like a typical Lannister in the fact that he's a dwarf, but because he's from a famous family, everybody knows the one dwarf from that famous family, Tyrion. But I was going to say, looks-wise, aside from the dwarvenness, Tyrion looks kind of like a rare Targaryen because he's got two different eye colors, and he's got hair that's so pale it's like white silver. Like sometimes it's considered to sort of look like that in certain scenarios in the books. I think Jaime, specifically in A Feast for Crows, Jaime is remembering when Tyrion says something in the way the light reflects off of his hair or something like that. He's like, wow, Tyrion's hair is fucking really pale, right? And then also Tyrion has two different colored eyes, which is heterochromia. So he's basically the Ziggy Stardust of A Song of Ice and Fire. No, everybody knows David Bowie has two different colored eyes, but also really cool. I've actually met a little kid when I was working at a trampoline park. This little kid had heterochromia, and I remember, when I was working there, it was my job. I was basically if I was at a pool, I would be a pool watcher, a lifeguard, right? But I'm at the trampoline park, so I'm sort of like a lifeguard for the trampoline park. So I'm supposed to keep an eye out on things. This one little kid runs past me, and he had, heterochromia. So one of his eyes looked as though it was this large. Pupil was that large, and the other one was normal. And these kids, all the kids that come in there are always getting hurt, especially in the dodgeball court. So this one little kid came running out of the dodgeball court, what I thought was a concussed eye. I was like, holy shit, hold up, little man, where are you going? And he's like, what? I was like, oh, you have David Bowie. And he's like, what? And then his parent obviously starts to walk up. His mom's like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, no, I thought your son. And I explained to him, I was like, I thought your son has a concussion, dude, because, their eye is that color. And they were like, yeah, no, we know. That's our son. So, yeah, anyway. But, yeah, that was cool. That's how Tyrion looks. So Tyrion kind of looks like a Lannister. That was just a random sidetrack. But to answer your question about Doran's master plan, I'm a big fan of it. I can't wait till it unravels more. My thoughts on the sheepfuckers of Dorne. Well, I don't know. I think Dorne doesn't necessarily... Does Dorne have that reputation? I'm pretty sure there's probably some Dornish people that have a reputation of doing that, but that's mostly, Women of the Vale by Daemon on House of the Dragon. Daemon says that about his wife, Emma Arryn, in Fire and Blood, and then they did that on House of the Dragon as well. Thank you for that, submitting that comment. Hopefully you're watching this right now, my man, because it's late as hell over there. You're in GMT time, I think. That's 4 hours. What is that? Greenwich Main Time. That's like 4 hours ahead of where we're at over here. Maybe 6 hours. I feel like I've had my friend In Deep Geek on YouTube. He's, I think, 6 hours ahead. Maybe it's 4, but it's like one of those things that you remember wrong. I remember the thing wrong. It's like it's not 4 hours, or it's not 6 hours. It's 4 hours ahead. But But thank you for submitting that comment, my buddy Billy Bob Robertson. Also, thank you, North Must Remember. And the next one's from Eric S. Womack, and he says, thank you for submitting this comment, Eric. He says, if we get lucky enough to ever get a Doom of Valyria show, what would be the families that would be centered on besides the Targaryens? Now, that's interesting. So we don't know of any other named families, but there are a couple of individuals who survived the Doom of Valyria. So I'm trying to recall this dude's name, but it's like Oregon. Basically, he named himself the first emperor of Valyria after Valyria imploded and blew up, and the dragons all died. Right? There was several Valyrians, like the Targaryens, that were outside the initial, devastation that swept up, the actual Doom of Valyria, the cataclysmic event that wiped out all of them. Right? There were people that were at sea that seen it happen and probably died. Right? The area that Valyria, like the actual city, was built on, ended up being so badly damaged that water flooded it, and it became what's known as the Smoking Sea. And of course, it's like medieval times here on Earth, so everybody's like, it's cursed, you can't fucking look at it. Like somebody tells Tyrion, I think if I'm not mistaken, Mokoro tells Tyrion, you can't look at the smoking stacks that are in the vents of the smoke. If you look at it because you're immortal, you'll die, right? Probably that's not the case. It's probably because the waters are extremely contaminated and they have like sulfuric vents of gases. Like I think in dinosaur times, in one of the, excuse me, I need to drink some goddamn soda. In Jurassic Park times, so in the, Jurassic era, there would be these sulfuric vents and like these crazy things, these rents that would open up in the earth that would leak all of these noxious gases, and it would fucking destroy the dinosaurs that were just trying to eat some other dinosaurs or potentially trees, right? That's probably George was like, oh yeah, there's sulfuric vents and rents that are in the Smoking Sea. That's what the smoking part is. And if humans come near that, they fucking burst into flames and die in crazy looking ways where the average person would be like, oh yeah, a god's doing that because their skin's burning off and their eyes popped out, melted out of their face, right? Like that's what that means when Mokoro says that. But they're like, you gotta be mystic. So like Mokoro is a fire priest, and like from Melisandre we learned that fire priests potentially bullshit people. Like Maester's bullshit people because they're like welcomed wizards. Like they're allowed to do their magic and their healing because they help, they're beneficial to Westerosi society. But outside stuff like Melisandre, what she does, that's like frowned upon. Stannis isn't exactly the most accepted guy. He's sort of fighting his way to the crown, which is why a lot of people respect that. I like that. I respect that about Stannis because he's literally, it's like he tried to take King's Landing. He would have potentially won King's Landing if Renly wasn't a little bitch and didn't throw a temper tantrum. There was no reason for Renly to do that. I'm sorry, someone to pretend to be Renly. It was Garth Tyrell. Loras was the little bitch who went along with his sister Marjorie marrying Tommen and uniting Lannisters and Tyrells. And it really bites him in the ass because Cersei happily sends him off to his death at Dragonstone. So the Tyrells are kind of dumbasses. Marjorie is a dumbass too because she should have... It's hard to say because we don't know exactly what's happening with Marjorie. We got so few POVs in Dance with Dragons, but there's some dumbass characters. They do some dumb things. Loras is one of them. Loras is the reason why Stannis lost the Battle of the Blackwater. Stannis won. And, Cersei thinks, like, Stannis was going to rape us. And I don't mean to mock that because, that's not something you mock lightly. But he probably would have been like, bitch, I'll ransom you back to your father. Go. Like, Stannis is the type of dude that probably would have realized it would cause more problems to outright kill Cersei and all of her children. That he probably would have tried to have a trial or something. Cersei wouldn't have been immediate. And obviously Stannis himself isn't the type to do that. But the people that he was with, he had some sellswords. They probably would have did that. And Stannis would have allowed them to do it because that was part of the agreement and how he got them to join his causes. But anyway... after all that, he goes up north and he's sort of fighting his way, and he's like, I'm gonna rally all. I'm gonna spend some time at Castle Black. Leave Melisandre there so she could save Jon Snow's life. Ultimately, I'm trying to get a Stark, so he's attacking Winterfell. But anyway, let me get back on track. Eric said, "What families?" Right. So we have we have this one guy known as the first Emperor of Valyria, who, after the events of the Doom of Valyria, he gathers his dragon and something like 40,000 men. And I think this is like within 5 years after the Doom, he tries to march back to Valyria and go and claim all of the wealth that was left behind there. And guess what? They all die. His dragon dies. There's this place called Vaes Toloro in Clash of Kings where Daenerys is, after Khal Drogo dies, Daenerys is with the remnants of her Khalasar, and they're sort of wandering around the Red Waste, and they come across this place named Vaes Toloro, and Daenerys sends out riders, and one of the riders goes to a certain place and finds the bones of a dragon that was big enough for him to ride, I think like 3 or 5 men to ride widthwise through the mouth of the dragon. So it was a pretty big dragon. So this was probably the bones from that one first Emperor of Valyria, which is really cool because that's one of the first bits of lores that I figured out myself. Everybody figures it out, right? Everybody immediately when you hear that, and then if it's after a point where Fire and Blood came out or World of Ice and Fire came out, and you realize this first Emperor of Valyria is a dude like George is sort of filling in that initial thing that he like, because he's probably initially was like, yeah, let me have Daenerys' riders find these bones because there's more dragons at some point. Like there's got to be some dragon bones in Essos. This is where Valyria was. This is where the dragons sort of came from. So there'd be dragon bones. But then he kind of filled in that blank, I think, by and I don't even know if Vaes Toloro is near where that dude was marching at, the first Emperor of Valyria. But it's really cool because, we know he did that. And dragon bones themselves, have magical properties. You can use dragon glass to kill White Walkers. And dragon glass is formed... obsidian naturally is formed when volcanoes happen. And I think it's like... It's like fused sand, like right sand that's basically been superheated. Isn't that what obsidian glass is? Right? It's a really hard form of rocks. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Like if that has magical properties, you would assume dragon bone does. Like for instance, we have dragon bone bows. And they're stronger than weirwood bows. They're the strongest bow in the World of Ice and Fire. So dragon bones can be used to make weapons with. You can imagine there would be a dragon bone dagger, like not a dragon glass dagger, but a dragon bone dagger would potentially be something that I think would kill the Night King. If there is, well, there is a Night King. There was at one point a Night King in the books, but if there's a similar situation where someone has like a dragon bone dagger or something that could be used to kill a White Walker, or maybe, damage someone who's wearing a piece of Valyrian steel armor. A lot of people think Euron has a full suit of Valyrian steel armor. I just think that's nonsense. Like, yeah, there'd be a relic like that laying around in Valyria, because outside of the Seven Kingdoms, lots of people have Valyrian steel weapons, right? But a whole suit of armor, like, no, it's probably like a piece of it. I could see a piece of someone wearing a piece of Valyrian steel and being stabbed with dragon bone, and that dragon bone doing extra damage, because that's the thing. George has fleshed out his world a lot, but he hasn't given us a lot of information on magic. The magic in his world is pretty practical, I would think. Probably works in a similar way to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is, well, the Brotherhood part, that's the newer anime. The original one was just Full Metal Alchemist. It's basically how magic works in that world, where they're all alchemists. They have to sacrifice something of equal value in order to obtain something. So there's this one alchemist who's known as the Full Metal Alchemist because when he was a child, his mother died, and him and his brother Elric and Alphonse, those are the names of the two brothers, they tried to bring back their mom, and one of the rules of that magic system in Full Metal Alchemist world, which is an anime, it was initially a manga, they turned it into an anime, and then it didn't follow it's a classic story with like shows today. Shows fail when they don't stick to the storyline, when they don't stick to source material. That's what happened with the original Full Metal Alchemist. Like, it failed because they sort of, like, they couldn't keep up. It's the same thing with the Song of Ice and Fire. It's amazing. They couldn't keep up with how fast the show was coming out with the manga issues that were being released from the actual creator in Japan. So they kind of had to make up their own shit, right? So the original anime Full Metal Alchemist turned out crazy. It was the one I watched as a kid in like 2002, 2003. I'm watching it on Cartoon Network. I'm like, this is awesome. I had no idea. Then I read manga back then, but it was Shonen Jump, and I think I was reading stuff like Shaman King, Naruto. Obviously, I was big on Naruto. I wasn't really reading. Honestly, I didn't realize that every anime that I was watching back then had a manga to it. I just thought it was certain ones. So in my first issue of Shonen Jump, it was like Shonen Jump 11. I swear to God, Shonen Jump 11. And the release date should be around somewhere around 2002, I think, for Shonen Jump 11, maybe, because that was when I got it. I got it as a free sample thing for something I signed up with the school library for it. But anyway, that had Shaman King and Naruto in it. It didn't have Full Metal Alchemist. I think mainly because Full Metal Alchemist is kind of more teen oriented, and I was like a little kid. I was like 11 or whatever. So anyway, Full Metal Alchemist, the original one, sucked because they didn't follow the storyline, or they couldn't, and then the newer one, Brotherhood, followed it to a T. But in that world, the magic system works as such, where you have to sacrifice something to gain something. And one of the rules in the magic system in that world is that you can't bring back a human after they... Why is my voice going out, dude? This is nuts. You can't bring back a human after they die. So these two little boys, Elric and Alphonse, they want to bring back their mom. So Elric is like, dude, I can get the exact ingredients for a human body, and they do that. They try to bring back their mom, but their mom comes back as this disfigured, horrible thing. So they end up, Alphonse, I think, loses his entire body. And then the main character, Elric, I think it's Elric. I always get them. It's embarrassing if I get them confused. But anyway, he just loses his arm and his leg, and he's known as, Full Metal Alchemist. But his brother's like this suit of armor, so it's badass. But in that world, there's rules, and that's how that magic system is set up. And I think George's world is similar to that, where you kind of have to, if you want to bring back somebody, you kind of have to give up something, right? So Thoros of Myr, well, no, that doesn't apply there, because Thoros doesn't necessarily give up anything to bring back Beric. He just sort of says fuck it and says a prayer. He mentions how he's not necessarily that faithful of a Red Priest. Like, when he came over to Westeros initially, it was to try to convert King Robert into being a priest of Valor, right? But he failed at that. So him and Robert became drinking buddies, and Robert just really liked Thoros because Thoros would always light a sword on fire in the melees. And he would go through swords. It's specifically, remember that one of the blacksmiths has a big problem with Thoros, because every time Thoros comes to a shop, he's going to ruin one of his swords, and he's like, this fucking guy, right? But yeah, anyway, so Thoros and Robert were buddies, so Thoros kind of never did his Valorly duties, and then he randomly just says fuck it and brings back Beric. Like, Beric and Thoros and the brother without banners are sent out by Ned Stark when Ned's acting hand of the king, right? He sends them out to go and track down the Mountain, because the Mountain, on orders of Tywin Lannister, is raping and pillaging the Riverlands, and that's the home of Ned's wife, Catelyn. She's a member of House Tully. To answer your question, Eric, before I move on to the next one, thank you for your support, my dude. I don't know. I would say something, if we get a Doom Valyria show, I would want it to be related to something on the Emperor of, the first Emperor of Valyria. It would be cool, because that dude had 40,000 people, I think. And then also a really big dragon. It was really big. And that dragon would potentially look nothing like the dragons that we've seen, even though they've made some pretty distinguished dragons on House of the Dragon. But this dragon wouldn't be related to the Targaryen dragons that they brought from Valyria. And remember, Balerion is from before Valyria. So Vhagar and Meraxes and all the other dragons were born once they were on Dragonstone. But Balerion potentially is the only dragon that was still alive until, Viserys rode Balerion when he was younger. And then he died. But Viserys has one I'm sorry, Balerion has one big hurrah with Arya because they go to Valyria after Aegon's conquest. Also a big hurrah with Maegor because Maegor uses him to kill Quicksilver. Balerion kills Quicksilver, takes a trip to Valyria with Arya, and then dies after the conquest. But before the conquest, remember, he was around since Valyria. So he was around before Aegon was even born, and potentially we could see Balerion in this Doom of Valyria show if they do a show based on Valyria. I thought it would be cool because obviously you need more like diversity on screen. Everybody agrees with that, whether you're black or white or whatever your race is, right? You probably, at some point, if you're my age, at least if you're like in your mid 30s, you've probably grown up most of the time watching movies that had no black people or no Asian people, at least Asian people depicted in a non-racist light, or Jewish people. And I've said that recently too, Jewish people as a race, because I didn't know this. Kanye West, dumbass as he is, this might be controversial, but not really. I didn't realize. I feel like a dumbass now, but I was kind of under the assumption of what Whoopi Goldberg thought, which is that Jewish people literally were just white people. That's actually not the case. Jewish people are Middle Eastern people. So, like, if I'm not mistaken, the original Jewish people that were kicked out of Israel were from over there, which means I asked myself if, I saw a famous Middle Eastern person, right? So, I don't know, the fucking dude from the boy band show. His name's like Maine or something, or Zane, that guy. I look at that guy and I'm like, no, he's not white. That's kind of like how Jewish people are. I didn't know that my whole life, literally up until like a few months ago. I had no idea. I just thought like it's a religion. I thought it was like Catholic people. Like obviously my aunt's Catholic. My grandma, who's black, is Catholic. So I didn't look at Catholic people as another race. I looked at it as a religion. That's kind of how I did with Jewish people. I didn't know that. And I actually have some, besides the point. But yeah, so anyway. I thought it'd be a good idea to do a Valyria show because all of those dragon riders looked like that because they're from all over Essos, right? The only one common denominator they all had was just, on the TV show, it'll be silver gold hair. In the books, it's purple eyes and silver gold hair because you get, different looking, for the most part, all of the Valyrians in the main storyline, and then also the ones that you hear about in Fire and Blood, they're all like pale white skin, right? But also, there's Asian for sure because Ling and Yi is like obviously supposed to be ancient China, ancient Japan and stuff, and that's clearly like some of the histories that we have involved over there, like the Bloodstone Emperor, and I'm not all that versed in that because that's World of Ice and Fire. I've only read World of Ice and Fire twice. I've read the main series 7 times. I'll be finished with Dance of Dragons in the next couple of days. It'll be 7 rereads on the main series. I say that all the time, but it's just like that's kind of one of my catchphrases. But so yeah, Ling and Yi and the Five Forts and all that stuff. That's probably the original dragon riders. So you would assume, and then also in certain continents like Solthrios and Ulthos, there's wild dragons, there's wyverns, they're everywhere. So Valyria was probably like ancient Rome in the sense that like. Well, it was because you could be you didn't have to be a dragon rider in Valyria to have a lot of power, and in ancient Rome, you didn't have to be from Rome. You just had to be a Roman citizen. And if I'm not mistaken, a slave could eventually earn citizenship in Rome. And then if you owned land, you could have a say-so in the council, like laws and trade and stuff that happens in Rome. So that's pretty cool. You could work your way up. That's kind of how I would imagine Valyria is like. It just hasn't been discussed in the lore because George hasn't written it yet. Like there's no texts that survive from 300 years, plus years ago for how Valyrian culture was. You would assume that that's something that'll probably be discussed on one of the TV shows. But yeah, so... thank you for submitting that. I feel like, yeah, because I'm trying to think, like, there's no other family aside that ride dragons. We could probably, maybe we'll find out that, just on a whim, and it would definitely be in show canon only, right? So, like, maybe we could find out that certain members of House Velaryon or certain members of House Celtigar, right, rode dragons, but the branch that we see in the TV show and the branch that we hear about in the books lost that connection to those members, right? Because the reason why I say that is because, for instance, there's a whole group of Aarons, members of House Aaron, who are far descended from the family that is currently inhabiting the Vale. So Robert Aaron, the little boy, Sweet Robin, and his mom, his dad, right, rather, John Aaron, there's a whole branch of their family that's out, like, that are merchants. They left initially from the Vale because it was crowded, it was overcrowded, too many family members in one place, so they got rich off of being merchants of trade. So there's cadet branches of House Targaryen and House Blackfire, with the North, House Stark and Karstark and stuff. There's probably potentially members of, House Celtigar or House Velaryon from Valyria that stayed and didn't go to Westeros with the Targaryens that could ride dragons because eventually they married into their families. So what I'm getting at is that in the TV canon, you could easily, now that they made Corlys a Blackman, you could have the whole member of the Velaryon family, the ones that stayed in the Freehold for the Doom, not that escaped with the Targaryens, because you could say that they were really close to that branch of the Targaryens because Dany's the Dreamer. They knew a lot about dragon dreams back then because everybody had fucking dragons. So they're like, yo, no, this is legit. We all need to get the hell out of here. This is going to end. They saw the writing on the wall. But we could say there was a branch that was stayed, and they married into another, dragon riding family because of their wealth or whatever. And obviously the branch that left wouldn't have that connection or that ability to ride dragons, right? But you could have people that look like Corlys. And obviously, I just explained the whole Asian connection, right? And all of that would be able to coexist in canon for the Valyria show. That's why I get excited about it. Not just because it's like... well, no, that's a main reason. Because, yeah, this potentially would have the most dragons. You know what I mean? On one TV show, like way more than the Dance Dragons, because this is Doom. This would have to be like one of the shows they make after they've made a bunch of money from House of the Dragon. So like they use the Game of Thrones money to make House of the Dragon, right? Probably a good chunk of that, and they're probably going to use some of the profits from House of the Dragon to make some of these other shows, like Dunk and Egg, right? Some of the confirmed ones. Thank you for that question. And the next one is from, thank you for that, Eric S. Womack. The next one is from Shell Lynn, and she says, it would be interesting to know why Dorne was never taken over. Intriguing. And I saw Shell Lynn in the chat here earlier. Let me look in the chat and make sure audio is still good. I don't see anybody saying that I'm muted, so I'm assuming I'm good. All right, cool. So the next one, like I said, is from Shell Lynn, and thank you for your support on Patreon, Shell Lynn, and also thank you for watching. Right now, she says, it would be interesting to know why Dorne was never taken over. Intriguing. Was there some spell over the land? Is there a blood connection to the First Men? Why did Dorne people look at bastard children in a different light? So to answer the last part, Shell, why did the Dornish people look at bastard children in a different light? That directly relates to Daenerys' predecessor, so Daenerys' namesake. Daenerys on the main series, initially one of her ancestors was sort of married off to one of the princes of Dorne. I think it was about 100 years or so. Yeah, about 100 years before the events of the main show. And the Dornish prince, in order to impress that Daenerys, who was a Targaryen, he built her this thing called the Water Gardens. And the Water Gardens is basically this oasis in the middle of the Dornish climate, which is the desert. So during that time period, randomly one day, Daenerys, not Daenerys from the main series, but Daenerys' namesake, like the person Daenerys Khaleesi was named after, she's like, everybody, y'all can get in the pool. It's hot as shit. Everybody, let's just get in the pool. And when they did that, she's like, specifically, she allowed the children of the people who worked, were working and laboring, to go and to relax and, take a break from the Dornish heat. And when she did this and she saw the children playing, she saw the people playing, she's like, dude, everybody's in here naked. I wonder if they would all bang me. She's like, if all these dudes would bang me, and I'm just kidding. That's not what she said. I had to throw in a joke there because I was being too serious. But she noticed that everybody was the same. Everybody's equal. They're all naked, happy, playing in the pool, right? So when she did that, she realized that highborn people and lowborn people are exactly the same. We all just want to enjoy life, right? So that motto and that idea was carried throughout Dorne, in that same with their paramours. Remember, I was talking earlier about how their paramours are paraded openly around. They get to experience life as a normal person, and they actually experience more of life than the average Dornishman, because it's openly accepted that their parent, or they're tied into royalty, but through lust, not through an official marriage. So you know what I mean. So that same idea carries over to the bastard children. A lot of the times, those bastard children are allowed to, just live life. They're not scorned. Like, they realize, oh, like, dude, marriage isn't something that people do for love when you're excuse me, that was a horrible burp. Marriage isn't something you do for love when you're a political, like when you're a queen, you're a princess of Dorne, when you're a prince of Dorne, you're a member of House Tyrell, member of House Lannister, a member of House Stark, House Targaryen, right? You don't get to marry for love. You have to do it for political reasons. So in Dorne, they realize it's kind of messed up to not be able to, like, obviously they're going to be forced to have those political marriages, but it's messed up to try to hide what they're doing. They would rather be open about it, because not only does the husband get to do it, but also the wife gets to do it too. Like, they both get to have concubines. They could be intimate with people they love instead of who they're forced to be intimate. Like, they ultimately do their job. They have the heirs, the political heirs they need, but they also allow themselves that freedom. And I think that actually stems from the oppression from Aegon. And I think that was another part of your question too. You're saying, why was Dorne never taken over? Is the first question. It's because Aegon fucking lit shit up under their asses. And I think the Dornish sun, in combination with always being in war, Dornish environment is so harsh, so the Dornish people are always sort of at war, and they're not necessarily the most agreeable folks, but that's like the rest of Westeros. It's just especially so in Dorne because of the harsh environment, right? So the food and resources and all that stuff, it's kind of scarce. So the Dornishmen, until the Rhoynar came over, kind of, I don't think, fully united under one house until House Martell. House Martell married Nymeria, and the Rhoynar married into their family and integrated into Dornish society, and that kind of chilled them out, right? But ultimately, I think that's what makes them sort of accept things like being in love with somebody that you aren't politically in a marriage with, and being open about it, because it sucks to be secret about that shit, right? Who wants to live their life like that? So the fact that they have such an oppressed environment, right, nature-wise, weather-wise, and then also the histories that's happened there, it makes them okay with certain things, and they're seemingly more advanced than people in Westeros. And you get that same juxtaposition in Essos, where Tyrion's being explained the three magisters that are going to be voted in Volantis. So there's like Tyrion is with Jorah, and Jorah explains to him the political factions that are in Volantis and how they have to vote for three different kings, basically, instead of one. And Tyrion makes fun of that, and he's like, yeah, imagine me trying to rule the realm. I did a good Roy Dotrice there. He's like, imagine me trying to rule the realm with Jaime and Cersei. That would never work. That would be insane. And Jorah's like, well, yeah, they think we're savage for only having one person. And then Jorah gives the example of recently when when three of them were elected, one of them was insane, and they didn't know it until after he was elected. So the other two triarchs with equal power fucking put the nix on the third guy who was insane, and then they ruled for 1 year until his term was up, and then they released him, and he was no longer in power, and neither were they, so there was another election, right? So I don't think it's 1 year, it might be a couple of years, but that's actually kind of what the modern world, like, it's 4 years here in the U.S., but I think some other places it's 2. After you run, you can never run again kind of thing. And also it's split up into 3 different cabinets of government. So that's kind of the 3 triarchs and all that. And Tyrion mocks that. But like I said, Jorah makes a point of like, no, it's actually makes sense because we're stuck with Joffrey. What happens if we're stuck with Joffrey? You gotta wait till he dies. And then his brother or his kids who are potentially from the same environment in the same type of background. So they're going to think the same way and do the same thing. That's no. makes more sense how they do it in Volantis. And Volantis is initially a Valyrian colony, one of the few that actually survived the Doom of Valyria and became sovereign. And also, there's these black walls that they have where the old blood resides. So, Blood of the Dragon is in Volantis. Now, George doesn't specifically say that there's some dragon riding people in Volantis. No, but there's people who have blood whose ancestors have ridden dragons in the past in Volantis. And one of those individuals could potentially pop up and steal one of Dany's dragons. So that's always something that's really cool about A Song of Ice and Fire. It's like you never know with all these different... Valyria really did rule the shit out of the world when they were... when the Valyrian Freehold was in its power. It's kind of like Rome. Rome spread everywhere. Their influence was all over the place. And still to the day, like we use like the Julian calendar or something, which is like directly from the Romans. So, thank you for that. I think I got all the questions in that, Shaolin. It would be interesting to know why Dorne was never taken over. Intriguing. Was there some other spell that allows to magic blood connection to the first man? Oh, there's the last one right there. Is there a blood connection to the first men? Potentially. The first men, I don't think ever really settled in Dorne all that much. I think they continued north. The Yarm of Dorne was shattered. So initially the first men did cross through the Yarm of Dorne to come into Westeros, but I think they mostly settled up north and then along. They settled all over Westeros. So to be fair, yes, there's some Dornish connections through blood to the first men for sure. But I think ultimately the Andals, they came after the first men. They ultimately settled most of that area. So the Dornishmen in the books are like 3 different complexions. There's like a really pale Dornishman, and then there's like the Dornishman who looks like the Martells, like Oberyn, because they're descended from the Rhoynar. The Rhoynar are described as being kind of like a Moorish Spain, like an Iberian Peninsula person, right? Kind of like myself, right? I'm not from the Iberian Peninsula, but I'm saying kind of look like that, right? That's a complexion of Dornish people, and then you also have like the coastal Dornish people or whatever, and they like sandy, salty, and whatever. The ones that live near the coast, I think, they look like most of the regular Westeros people. But I think in the TV show they made all the Dornish people look like Moorish or whatever. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's one of George's co-authors got in trouble for saying they should have all been like how George did it, or shouldn't have all been like, it doesn't matter, who cares. But anyway, so I think, definitely there is a connection. The first men came, from Essos, to Westeros through the Arm of Dorne. Some of them settled there. Mostly that environment probably, sparse. I think for the most part, that's probably why. It helps to the reason why Dorne was never taken over. Like there's something called the Prince's Pass, which is like one of the direct routes. It's eventually called the Prince's Pass. It's called the Prince's Pass after the Daeron the Young Dragon marches on Dorne. But before that, it's like the Mountain Pass where a lot of people die. It's really funny. Is it Aegon the Unworthy? One of the Targaryen kings is so stupid. This is during a time when there's no dragons, so he tries to build wooden dragons and arm them with wildfire. So they're basically like Trojan horses, like full-on wooden Trojan horses with wheels, and they have torches in them, and they blast out wildfire. They fucking blew up before they could ever make it to the Prince's Pass. But there's this that road that you travel from Westeros to get there, from the Stormlands to get there. It's pretty harsh, and if you're unfamiliar, it's really treacherous. Like you'd have to use something called goat tracks, and if you don't know the way, you'd slip. It's similar to the way down from the is like basically bring supplies up to the Eyrie, because remember the way is really treacherous. But Robert would visit Jon Arryn because Jon Arryn raised him as a kid, and Robert puts his dick in everything, and he has bastard daughters all over the place. Edric Storm is one of them. How Gendry gets sent away on by Davos on the TV show. It's actually Edric Storm in the books, and he hangs out with Shireen and stuff, and he's around Shireen's age, and Davos sends him away to Essos. You don't exactly know where he is. Robert's got bastards all over the place, and also Gendry, who's with Arya, is a bastard of his. So potentially all of them have a claim, which is interesting. But anyway, that character Maya Stone, she uses something called donkey tracks, which is like similar to the way into Dorne to try to take over Dorne. It's narrow. You can't get an army through there. There's events in history in Westeros where entire massive armies have been taken out just by Dorne's environment, like the weather and stuff. But thank you for submitting that question, Shell Lynn. That was really in depth. I love that question. And then I got another one from Claudia V. Haras. I think she's watching. I was just messaging her earlier on Instagram. She says, you think we will see Melisandre in House of the Dragon? I would love to see Carice Van Houten return, and I'm amazed she hasn't aged a bit. Hell yes, Carice Van Houten looks amazing. I've kind of mentioned this a few times. I feel like I haven't been convinced to change my opinion on it too much, but that's just because, once you get set in your ways on something, it's kind of hard to change them a little bit, especially headcanons, I feel like she would just be an avatar of Melisandre. Melisandre is Melanie of Lot 7, and, as far as we know, it's part of the trouble with listening to the audiobooks when I'm going to bed. I swear to God, there was a certain point where I thought someone mentioned that Melisandre was 60 years old. So it was like 55 years ago or something. But she's obviously older than that. I just don't know. It was some sort of connection I was making because I was thinking of, not a theory, but I was thinking of other things. And then a line, Roy reads you a line and it's like, oh shit, wait, there's a connection there. But I never rolled over to write it down because if I had moved, I would have woke my son up. And he literally makes me lay with him in bed for like an hour and a half to put him to sleep at night and in nap time. So, it wasn't worth taking those notes because he stayed asleep and then I got to go to sleep. You know what I mean? But yeah, so potentially, I don't think Melisandre was in Westeros yet when Dance with Dragons was. The main reason being is because if she was on that path and not still training in a Shai and like learning how to be a shadow binder, she would have been more accurate. Like, she wouldn't be like, so like, she says R'hllor showed her in the flames that Stannis is Azor High, but then she mentions how studying flames and looking into them and how it's this art and how she's the best one in her order to do it, but she still is wrong all the time, right? I feel like if she had been in Westeros during the time period where, Alice Rivers was a thing, she would know more information and she would like immediately be like, Jon Snow, you're a fucking Targaryen. I hung out with your direct ancestors who looked a lot like you. They just had silver gold hair, but she never did that, right? She kind of feels like, I feel like Melisandre's making it up as she goes along. So especially when we get her POVs in A Dance of Dragons, she doesn't reveal any more information. But I have said this is how I feel about it. I think she's an avatar for Melisandre in the sense that Alice Rivers is a shadow binder. For sure. Alice Rivers is trained in blood magic and potentially, everybody says that the Aemon's baby was a shadow baby, but that was stupid. I think I think that theory is silly. I think the shadow baby was used, or the demon shadow was used when the guy who ran back to King's Landing said, don't laugh at me, and then everybody laughed at him and he gets choked out. That's when the shadow demon happened. But the child that she has may actually be Aemon's kid. There's no reason for it to not be. She doesn't age. Potentially she's been around. She was a milkmaid potentially for Harwin. Well, she was definitely a milkmaid for Harwin, but potentially for his father, Lionel even. Like there's rumors say she was letting Lionel suck on her titties when he was a baby. And remember, he's like 55. He's like 50s, in his 50s when he dies in the TV show and in A Song of Ice and Fire. But thank you for submitting that, Claudia, and also thank you for your support. And the last question from my patrons over on patreon.com. If you're watching this, please consider joining. You can join for $2 and you immediately gain access to, a vast library of content, but also, for example, I summarized this entire stream in 15 minutes yesterday. So if you want to watch a shorter, condensed version, you can do that. I'm like reading directly from the book, and when I'm doing that, it's easy. I think I make a lot more sense when I'm reading directly from Dance of Dragons. I was looking for it right here. But the last question is from Mixed Queen Destiny Phillips 420. Thank you for your support, Destiny. She says, no question. Oh, really? Just wanted to say Dorne should have more chapters, in my opinion, for sure. I think Dorne, it doesn't have that many, and that's, like, I agree with you there. I think people kind of forget that, because the things that happen in the chapters and the POVs that are in Dorne, it's a lot more faster than some of the other characters. So Tyrion travels with Griff for quite a while. Then he travels with Jorah for quite a while, and he still hasn't gotten to Daenerys yet, and it's at the end of A Dance of Dragons. So you get the Dornish chapters, right? You get this Dornish master plan. You get this skull arriving. You get the trip out into the desert where Darkstar does some emo shit, right? As Aerys Oakheart charges into danger, right? A lot of shit happens, and quickly, in few chapters. So I think we as readers get caught up in that. We're like, yo, there's too much going on with Dorne. George shouldn't have written himself into the, I think people call it, like a writer's wall or writer's knot or whatever. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think there should be more Dornish chapters. I agree. Thank you for submitting that comment, Mixed Queen Destiny Phillips 420, and also thank you for your support. This right here. Oh, no, I didn't. This is an ornament that you got me from my P.O. box. That is for Sarion. I put that up there next to Tyrion, who just dropped. Well, Tyrion's a midget, so Tyrion dropped 100 stories. Holy shit. His head is... He's missing half his nose. No, I'm just kidding. I remember I always tell myself before I start my streams, I'm like, man, I'm not going to pull my props down. I'm not going to show people my cool backdrop, because literally every fucking YouTuber has a backdrop. Mine's ain't special, but it's really special to me, especially with this right here. Not going to lie. That is a hand-painted piece from my boy, J Fox. But yeah, I was going to say, I don't have a P.O. box anymore. I got rid of that because it's expensive. It's like $60 a month. And I just spent all this money doing this. You can't see it, but I'm using a laptop that costs me. To be fair, I had some help from my patrons. So it cost me a lot, but it didn't cost me that much because I had help from them. So this is going to be it. I got to go. I think it was 1 hour and 37 minutes. That's pretty good. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please do me a favor. Slap a like on this video. Like goal is going to be 420. Also, consider checking out some of the other videos that are linked down below. I have like a big list of like live streams. I've done them pretty much every week since House of the Dragon went off. There's a couple weeks that I skipped, but ultimately when I come back from taking a break, I'll do like 2 in a few days to make up for that. So really haven't missed a beat. And these are all live streams, not just talking about House of the Dragon, but also all of Song of Ice and Fire stuff. So please consider checking that out. Also consider subscribing.